This is the gait analysis presentation for Team 3B, presenting Chase Barhorst, Aubrey Courville, Marissa Joseph, and Maria Muto. Good. On to the first slide.
Okay, these are our two subjects that we analyzed. We have subject 8, which we'll be calling the little girl here. She appears to be around 6 or 7 in age. And we also have to the right subject 14. She appears to be in her late 40s, maybe early 50s.
So the next slide is going to talk about the similarities found within these videos. And so what we found was asymmetrical rhythm within the gait. So video number 8, she spent longer time in stance on the left. And in video 14, neither side was entirely predictable. Okay, so we're going to show the similarities. I'm going to play video number 8. And as you can see, she's spending more time in stance on the left. And now I'm going to pause that and play video number 14. And as you are looking at her gait, you can see from side to side, it's not predictable as she is walking. But she is demonstrating an asymmetrical rhythm as she is walking.
Okay, so as you can see here, we have another similarity. That we don't have heel contact during initial contact in the gait cycle. So we do have a loss of the ankle mechanism. On the left-hand side, we have flat foot contact on the right foot. Let's go back. And you can see in the still frame here that we're hitting with a flat foot. On the right-hand side for subject 14, we have bilateral flat foot or forefoot contact. It changes throughout her cycle. It's not very predictable during that initial contact.
We also noticed more similarities within their trunk. Both have trunk abnormalities at some point in the gait cycle, which we will break down a little bit more later. That includes an anterior trunk lean. We know that subject 14 has some instability in the trunk generally as well, but we'll go into that in a later slide.
Alright, more similarities between the two. They both have moments where they lack knee flexion. This is predominantly during the loading response and the stance phase of gait.
So continuing with the similarities within each video, we noticed that video number 8 and 14 showed pelvic rotation. And we also concluded that both subjects have possible weakness, and those weaknesses are present within the quads and the pretibials.
Moving on to some differences that we see, on the left-hand side with subject 8, we can see that her gait is asymmetrical, but there is relative control throughout. However, on the right side with subject 14, we notice a lack of control, especially a possible decrease in her eccentric quadriceps control.
Going on to talk about more differences between the subjects. Subject 8 seems to lack knee flexion in stance, but only on the right, whereas subject 14 lacks bilateral knee flexion in stance. So again, that's on both sides.
More differences, as you can see in the picture. There is a knee flexion, maintained knee flexion in initial contact on the left lower extremity.
So another difference, as you can see, is that subject 14 had an assistive device, which is a rolling walker, and subject 8 did not have an assistive device.
Okay, so we can see in the videos that our subject 14 on the right has general trunk instability, especially when she is not walking with the assistive device. However, on the left-hand side, it's a little bit more predictable. You can see a slight anterior trunk lean during the end of stance on the right limb. And you can see this in the video here.
And even more differences that we noticed between the two subjects. For subject number 8, we saw that she had a normal cadence, and subject 14 had a significantly decreased cadence. Subject 8's cadence we estimated at around 120 steps per minute. And by estimated, I mean we calculated. And for subject 14, we calculated her cadence to be 86 steps per minute, which is significantly decreased. And here's the video of normal cadence for our younger subject, subject 8.
When you compare the step length for each subject, you'll notice that subject number 8 has a relatively normal step length, and subject number 14 shows a decrease in step length.
So a specific difference of subject 8 is that she has increased obliquity and stance, particularly on the right leg, as shown in the picture on the left. Subject 14 seems to have normal or slightly decreased obliquity, which is obviously different from what is shown here.
Okay, to summarize the primary gait deviations for subject 8, we can see that she has flat foot initial contact on the right leg. We can also see that her right knee is extended throughout stance instead of having a normal bit of flexion. We can tell that there is an anterior trunk lean on the right side when we are going through terminal stance and pre-swing. We also notice a hip drop and a dynamic knee valgus.
So some of the hypotheses that we had for her subject 8's deviations. So if we thought for flat foot in initial contact, she perhaps had weakness in her pretibial muscles, therefore not allowing her to dorsiflex. In the absence of her right knee mechanism, we thought that might be due to weak quads, so they couldn't control her leg eccentrically in stance to achieve the knee mechanism. This could also be due to a possible leg length discrepancy, which may allow for more stability during stance. We saw had an anterior trunk lean in right stance and terminal stance and pre-swing. We thought that might be for increased momentum during this swing phase, so she might be trying to gain momentum by doing an anterior trunk lean at that point. And we also thought that her hip drop and dynamic knee valgus might be due to weak hip abductors.
And moving right along, the primary gait deviations we saw for subject 14, we have forefoot or flat foot contact bilaterally in initial contact. We have an absence of the knee mechanism during stance and very, very many rhythmic disturbances.
So the clinical reasoning for subject 14 are as follows. So the first is bilateral forefoot or flat foot contact in initial contact, and this could be due to weak pretibial muscles. Next is the absence of knee mechanism during stance, and this could be due to weak quadriceps, specifically the lack of eccentric control. And lastly, we see rhythmic disturbances, and this can be due to neural issues affecting the motor control.
Okay, so moving on to the clinical significance of our findings. In subject 8, we noticed that we are trying to work on her stability issues. However, she does have more control than subject 14. Her hip abductors are going to need some strengthening, as well as her quadriceps muscles and her pretibials. In subject 14, we are concerned primarily with stability and safety. And we've got a lot of trunk movement. We want to increase her coordination. So we're going to do some neuromuscular reeducation, really try and improve that neuromuscular control.
Talking further about clinical significance, for subject 8, again, we want to work on her strength, which we think will increase her overall efficiency. And for subject 14, our primary concern is her coordination and neuromuscular reeducation, as we discussed on the previous slide. Our secondary concern, however, is most certainly strength, and we think both go hand in hand.
Okay, and lastly, we, as far as clinical significance is concerned, with the older woman here, we would just want her to be independent and safe as she continues throughout her life. And for the younger girl here, we just want her to be able to safely play with her friends and keep up with them and be able to interact and socialize without any problems.